I've said this before when it comes to voting intentions of people on the left and right. The left are very fragmented, and it doesn't take a lot for the left to defragment and, let's say, not vote for Labour. We've seen at the moment, many people on the left will not vote for Labour because of Keir Starmer, but they are willing to vote for the Lib Dems, which are far, far closer politically to the Conservatives than almost certainly the Labour Party at the moment, giving some of their policies that they're putting out. That's another topic for another day. But of course, people on the right always go and vote for their party. They know who to vote for. But very much on occasions, we do sometimes see splits. Of course, the infamous, Conservative UKIP split, where UKIP was taking 12% of the vote away from these, Conservative areas. We saw that. That's why they panicked. That's why they pushed so heavily for Brexit, and the rest obviously is history. But it is very, very rarely that the right, or at least people on the right, do not go out and vote. So we are seeing something incredible happening at the moment, that you have people in these very true blue areas that are not only willing to not go out and vote because of Boris Johnson, but they are not willing to go out and vote for their own traditional Tory party. What is going on here is absolutely fascinating to see and incredibly interesting to see how this works, and especially how this could play out not only in the potential local elections, but given the fact that a general election could happen whenever now, because again of the election bills and the ability for essentially the PM to call an election whenever the hell he wants, we are entering into some very, very interesting territory which we have never even been in before. So this article is very, very interesting to go through. So we'll be jumping into that. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button, because down below there are links to my Patreon page. And of course, there is my one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. So on with the story. This comes from The Guardian, with the title of London Galling. Could PartyGate sink the Tories' Wandsworth flagship? Boris Johnson used to be king of the capital. As a politician who presented himself as a metropolitan and socially liberal, he gave the Conservatives their first control of the London-wide government for 30 years by winning the mayoralty back in 2008. But now, the party is facing one of its toughest electoral tests in the city, and the Prime Minister risks insurrection from his own backbenchers if the PartyGate investigations threaten to hit them at the ballot box too. In the Tory flagship council of Wandsworth, voters are mulling whether their party's headline pledge to keep council tax low is attractive enough during the cost of living crisis to keep them from staying home or giving Labour a chance. While Labour has inched ahead in the popular vote by just a few hundred votes in the last council elections, the Conservatives still cling to the highest number of councillors. It doesn't matter if we make great gains or even win overall control of a few areas. If Wandsworth falls, then that will be the narrative of the night, and admitted a minister who has been out campaigning in the area. And again, this will be one of the seats to watch when we do our election watch of that night. Almost certainly, we'll be concentrating on just what happens there. Any losses there? It's who knows how the rest of that evening could go. Ruth, who lives in Battersea, used to be a Conservative member, and she said that as a barrister, she was deeply unhappy with the Prime Minister's breach of COVID laws, saying, "I would usually vote Conservative, but while he's its lead man, I don't consider its integrity. I wouldn't vote for them," she said. Speaking as she was usually canvassed by a Conservative councillor at her home in southwest London, Ruth spoke plainly about the message she wanted to send. I thought voting Conservative at the moment would seem an endorsement of the National Party because it's being reported in the media that if there are bad local election results for Boris, then people may move against him, which is what I want to happen. She admitted she was, quote, very pleased with how the local party is acting, but added, the leader is such an important issue that you've just got to change that. Margaret, who lives in nearby and also works as a teacher, is less concerned with Partygate. She says she sees the normally Conservative voters, but this time she is wavering. I don't think there's so much nonsense within the party at the top, she said, but it's nothing to do with Partygate. It's just that I don't think he's very competent. I think it's a bit of a disappointment. I had such good hopes when he came in. I just think he's really disappeared into the background. You hear nothing from him anymore, other than he's made a mistake. Margaret said she would probably abstain from voting because she was unimpressed by Keir Starmer's Labour, and added, I'm a bit disillusioned at the moment. Lauren, who works with Citizen Advice, said she would normally vote Liberal Democrat and was tempted to vote for the Conservatives locally since it's a Tory-Labour toss-up. She said, it's a challenge in your head to distinguish between a national party, she said. Activists currently pounding the street have lines at the ready for wavering voters such as Ruth and Margaret and Lauren, saying, it's not Boris on the ballot paper. It's a common refrain, as the argument that if whatever the wealthier residents do not rely on the Wandsworth lower council tax, their hard-pressed neighbours actually might. But can that still be a very tough sell? And in a nod to Gothley Howe's criticism of Margaret Thatcher, one council candidate in Lambeth and Southwark Conservative WhatsApp group complained that it would be, quote, easier if the National Party didn't break our local bats at the crease. And a Tory party MP also has privately moaned, it's like Downing Streets hate Tory councillors and are just figuring out just how to have as few as possible. Johnson certainly still has some supporters in London. When a Conservative canvasser knocked on Peter's door and asked if he had any concerns about the party nationally, he said that he did not, and that attention given to COVID breaking rules was a distraction. He said, we're in a proxy war with Russia, Peter said, and the Prime Minister's essentially trying to lead the free world. And of course, there are many sort of pressing local issues that do affect residents, from recycling to schools to crime and libraries. One resident, Anita, was desperate for the council and the police to try and crack down on motorcyclists driving dangerously fast along the pavement in front of her home. If you can do something about the road, you might have my support. Otherwise, I'll have to vote for someone else. She said when she was asked who would she vote for backing on May the 5th, for Labour. And the challenge is, of course, to try and remind voters that only a few hundred votes could very easily turn the council red. And as I've said before, local council elections can tip on just a few hundred votes. As we've always said right from the beginning when we're talking about local elections are not that well attended. Turnout is roughly around 30 to 35%. Sometimes it's even lower than 30%, depending where you go. It does not take a lot of people to turn out to vote, or in some cases, as we're hearing here, not vote for that tip to happen. While the number of volunteers offering to help with canvassing has plummeted since 2018, and of course, with a larger membership under Jeremy Corbyn was mobilised, fewer voters have now said to slam the doors shut when activists arrive. He said, I've said it's going to be incredibly tight. It looks like it's going to be on a knife edge. Generally a 50-50 election, said Simon Hague, Labour's lead on the Wandsworth Council. He said the Conservative campaign was just based around a single issue of council tax, whereas we're trying to marching that council tax. But we're also trying to have ambitious policies on the environment, housing, crime, and on education as well. Hogue admitted it was a key issue in the election whether Labour can actually be trusted with your money. And they understood the concerns about the given Labour-run Croydon Council was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. But he insisted that Labour had serious ambitions, a costed manifesto, and that was going to tax fairly. and would spend wisely. He claimed the credibility of the Wandsworth Conservatives was dropping and that they had no longer a run a tight ship. Hogg's insistence that the rate does appear to be on the knife heads is not hyperbole, though. Alan Richard Jones, a Conservative councillor up for re-election, said that Wandsworth's reputation for having the lowest average council tax in the UK was at the front of people's minds, and of course during the cost of living crisis. He told The Guardian that the Labour had a real credibility issue on council tax, pointing to its supposed increases in previous years. Wandsworth is used to thinking about local issues when it comes to council elections, Richard Jones said it. That's why our MPs over the decades have swung between Labour and the Conservatives. But the council has stayed Conservative for over 44 years. Jonathan Carr-West, the chief executive for the Local Government Information Unit, said that while polls suggested the Conservatives could lose control of the council, it's certainly close, both in terms of seats and in terms of the majorities within some of them. He said that given Wandsworth's prominence for Conservatives' flagships, its loss would be seen as a very serious blow to the government and would feed directly into the conversation about the Prime Minister's future. At the same time, it will be part of a longer-term trend in which Labour has tightened its grip on inner London. Over the last decade, we've seen increasing polarisation, with the Labour vote concentrated in large cities and university towns, and Conservative support spread across the rest of the country. Wandsworth and Westminster have resigned to this, but the margins have been getting even narrower. So, as you can see, there is interesting times ahead for this local council election, and I say it could be close. I think this is a very similar story to other places, but the fact that this Wandsworth could go when it is like a Tory flagship, if the Tories are going to put out a new policy, it's done here first. That's why it's a flagship. That's what you mean when it's a flagship. So if this goes to Labour, then that could very easily set the trend for what could happen for the rest of the night. Certainly on May the 5th, going into the 6th on the morning. And who knows, by the morning of the 6th, Boris Johnson's time in number 10 may very well be over. But a loss like this to the Conservatives, even if, let's say, they manage not to lose too many seats, but they lose ones like this, that's a disaster. That sets the stage for further trouble for Boris. A lot further trouble. And as we've said before, his fate could very well easily rest in the, shall we say, the 84 MPs who have so far remained silent on whether Boris should stay or go during Partygate. So, as always, this is something that we've got to keep a very close eye on. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Like I say, please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. I don't know, be your jazz hands. And as always, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. So, thank you very much, and we'll see you all next time.